Brazil, 2024. It reignited the debate around the red flag rule and whether or not cars should be able to change tyres. Now, that specific rule has a lot to do with safety, but maybe there's another way to satisfy both the teams and the viewers. Kia ora. My name's Kimmy, and I talk about Formula One in the world's second worst accent. And today, we're going to take a look at 3 controversial rules and how they could be changed to make racing fairer and in some ways possibly offer up more exciting races for spectators. I'll get to the tyre change under red flag shortly, but first I'm going to talk about another red flag rule that Melbourne 2023 really proved needs to change. With stoppages on laps 8 and 55, the sun was getting real low in the sky by the time everyone pulled up on the grid for the second of 2 standing restarts. The jeopardy of a grid start, combined with a fair amount of sunstrike and the added tension of only having 2 racing laps, resulted in a whole lot of carnage. And sure, this race did go down as one of the most exciting of the season, but it wasn't so fun for fans of Alpine, with Ocon and Gasly colliding with each other in a crash that was more bad luck born of the messy Turn 1 incidents than either of their fault. Sargent and De Vries also, unsurprisingly, ended up out, and Sainz got a bit squeezed, braked too late, and hit Alonso, which got him a 5-second penalty and dropped him all the way to last on the road once everything was done and dusted. In the end, only 12 cars crossed the finish line, this time under safety car protocol, as everyone exited the pits on what was already the last lap of the race. Now sure, standing starts are often the most exciting moments of a Grand Prix. The anticipation of the lights going out combined with the wheel-to-wheel battling at the first corner is always a wonderful combination of tension, stress and thrills. However, this video isn't just about how to make racing better for viewers, it's also about fairness. Something that's always been a bit of a hot topic in F1, and honestly, there's no solution to make things 100% fair. It's too complicated a sport for that, and there's always going to be an element of luck. But the FIA can make things a little bit better at least. And here's the thing about standing restarts. They aren't fair. They're stupid and there's not really any reason for them, and I will die on that hill. The only difference between a safety car or VSC being used and a red flag is the condition of the track and whether or not anyone will be put at risk if cars were allowed to remain on it. So why, you might ask, isn't a red flag restart exactly the same procedure as a safety car restart, regardless of the conditions or the timing? Cars still have to do a formation lap to the grid. It's not like they're losing an additional lap of racing, and it means when they do actually put the hammer down, we get a more representative order and reduce the risk of big accidents that, along with being kinda dangerous, cost teams a whole lot of money, often through no fault of their own, which is kind of a big deal, particularly in a cost cap era. Plus, I don't know, something about standing restarts just really rubs me up the wrong way. It feels so contrived. Action for action's sake rather than acknowledging what's come before and doing the best to get things going again with a decent chance of everyone going into turn 2 in the same position they were before they had to come back into the pits. So, first rule to change. Rolling restarts only. And I would talk about time penalties for causing a collision, but I think I already did that once. They shouldn't be time penalties, they should be position penalties. End of story. No more building a gap to negate the penalty, plus it would mitigate the opposite issue, like what happened to Sainz in Melbourne, which thanks to the race ending under safety car, well, it meant he dropped all the way from 4th to last on the road from a 5-second penalty. Although it did give us one of his most iconic team radios, and for a guy that's a goldmine of classic radio bangers, that's saying something.
No, it cannot be, Ricky. Lloyd deserves to be out of the points. No, no, please, ask them, please, 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 please.
Oh honey, unlike these rules, you should never change. Moving on, what about the debate that's been raging for years? The one that's back at the front of everyone's minds after Brazil. Cars be allowed to change tyres under a red flag. Well, yeah, that's kind of a requirement. Usually when a red flag is out, it comes with debris. You can't penalise drivers for running over a piece of carbon when they've got no other option. Unfortunately, this one is a luck of the draw situation, and it kind of is what it is. Sometimes it falls your way, like it did for Lando Norris in Miami, and sometimes it doesn't fall your way, like it did for Lando Norris in Brazil. But it can also make for a bit of a snooze fest of a race if things happen exactly when the pit window is open for a conventional one-stop race. Or if there's a huge accident at the start on a slow track like there was in Monaco this year, and everyone just slaps on the hards and goes to the end. But is there a way that a free tyre change can be offset? Could taking a tyre change under a red flag require you to do a pit stop as a trade-off? See, this is where things get tricky. Tyre strategy doesn't just involve the Grand Prix itself. It starts from the very moment cars go out on track in FP1. Teams save specific tyres for the race, and if they're required to do an additional pit stop after a red flag because they've changed their tyres for safety reasons, well, that could be an unfair disadvantage. And it's not like Pirelli is just going to pull out an extra set of mediums if there's a red flag. That's A, dumb, and B, not at all in line with the environmental goals of Formula One. It's also going to be a problem for those who would have otherwise pitted around the lap when the red flag was thrown, because it messes up their entire strategy and forces them to stop outside of their planned pit window. So what's the solution? Honestly, suck it up. If teams and drivers are going to complain about the red flag rule, then they need to accept that alternative solutions aren't always going to be perfect, and that luck is something you can't erase entirely. As I said earlier, F1 is too damn complicated for there to be elegant solutions to everything. And heck, there's plenty of races where there's more than one red flag and teams might change tyres in each instance, whether that's thanks to punctures or because of a perceived advantage. Teams already have contingencies, and forcing a pit stop after a tyre change on red means they'll be forced to activate said contingencies. Now obviously this isn't going to be possible in every circumstance. Take that Melbourne race for instance, plenty of cars driving through debris on the second to last lap and a red flag. So maybe the pit stop requirement is only in place until cars reach 75% race distance, and from then on, it's good luck to you. Maybe if there's a late stoppage, there's a requirement to only fit a used set if you're taking the option. And that would probably increase the number of cars taking the Aston Martin approach and scrubbing everything in practice, but as of course there's significantly less risk starting on used tyres when said restart isn't a damn standing one. But that's the kind of nuance that needs to be considered with data and analytics and, frankly, knowledge that I don't have. But when there's so many races now where the intrigue comes from pit stops rather than overtakes, not only would this shut up those complaining about the red flag rule, but it would also make for better viewing. I mean, I loved Monaco this year, but I am very aware I am in the tiny minority with that one. I don't know, try it for a couple of years and then bin it off if it's not working. You won't know until you give it a go. I mean, after all, it's not really that long ago that a driver could jump in a spare car and keep on going after a wreck. So rule 2, if a red flag is thrown prior to 75% of a race distance being reached and you change your tyres, you're penalised by way of an additional pit stop. I'm going to take a quick pit stop now to say thanks for watching my video and remind you that if you're enjoying it and you haven't already clicked on the subscribe button, you should totally do that. Share it with your F1 buddies, click the like button or the dislike button if that's your thing, whatever, it's still a click. And as always, thanks to those of you who watch my stuff regularly. Ka pai. Alright, that's enough of that, let's talk about blue flags. Now, I get it. I understand that it's kind of crappy to be coming up to a few cars pootling around at the back and getting stuck in a DRS train unable to pass because they're involved in their own little battle. But the reality of the matter is, even with the far closer field spread we've seen in the last few years, sometimes these cars aren't at the very back of the field. Sometimes they're battling for the last few points, and when they're forced to give way to a leading car, this can have consequences to their own championship, particularly on those races held on shorter circuits. Now, I'm not going to go full Martin Brundle here and say blue flags should be banned. I think that's problematic in its own way and opens up a whole can of worms that would include a whole lot of nefarious tactics to back leaders up into traffic, or even pushing things a little bit too far in a battle when you're being lapped because you know it might have a benefit in the grand scheme of things. Take Singapore this year, for instance. Lando Norris finishes the race almost 21 seconds ahead of the field. Meanwhile, Perez is a lap down. On a track where it's incredibly difficult to overtake, Checo would have had a great opportunity to really back Norris up as he was stuck behind Hülkenberg. And let's not be naive here, there's also the opportunity to punt someone into a wall or the gravel if you're allowed to fight with them while they're lapping you, which in the case of the Norris and Perez example, could have serious consequences for both the drivers' and constructors' championships. If you are sitting in 10th and have the opportunity to take some points off your team's main rival, all for the sake of a 10-second penalty and 1 championship point, would you do it? Because that is the position that Sergio Perez would have been in if that was a rule this year. And how would the stewards penalise something like this? The perception might be that someone was deliberately taken out a la Schumacher on Hill in 1994 or Schumacher on Villeneuve in 97, but it's hard to prove the intent, particularly if you're already saying they have the right to fight, even with all the telemetry data they have nowadays. So what's the solution here? There has to be a middle ground. And perhaps the thought here needs to be more about allowing cars that are a lap down to be more considered in when they let leading cars through. Rather than giving them 3 marshal posts, give them 1 full tour around the circuit, 1 lap from the next time over the start-finish line to decide the best opportunity. That also means that those cars attempting to lap other cars might have to fight a little bit if they want to get by earlier. The problem with this is it can get tricky because at the moment, blue flags are shown when the front-running car is less than a second behind the car about to be lapped. So in theory, all this idea would do is put anyone stuck in a DRS train somewhere in the midfield at an even further disadvantage due to not being able to battle the cars in front for a lot longer than they would under the current rules. The car in front is going to get a whole extra lap to let the passing car by, meanwhile the person potentially behind them can't do bugger all. And of course this could be mitigated by requiring all cars within a second of one another at the next timing line to move aside at some point in the next lap. But wait, that's not going to work either, because what if the car at the rear of a DRS train decides to do it on the last corner? Let that car by at the very last moment. That would completely screw over everyone ahead who would fall foul of the rules. Well, maybe that's a tactic that needs to be explored. Maybe, sure, you can leave it to the last second if you want, but if you do it after the final DRS detection line, the car ahead gets an extra lap to obey the blue flag, which will probably completely wreck your race and would be a good deterrent to anyone actually trying it. It sounds complicated, but the reality is this is all information informed by the telemetry data that the pit wall has on hand. And we already have to deal with the completely nonsensical changes they're constantly making to the overtaking rules. So, blue flags, 1 full lap to let them past, or you get a penalty. And speaking of penalties, I'm all in favour of a return to drive-thrus being the punishment du jour for egregious flouting of the rules. What do you think? Too harsh, or more likely to give us some really good long battles rather than what Max did in Mexico? You know, as long as Formula One finally sucks it up and makes race stewards a professional position anyway.